Mario Odyssey? Hard to describe, really. It's expansive and bite-sized, familiar and fresh, accessible and tough. Simple and clean is the way I am making my videos. It's hard to make a joke. I had a good enough time with it, as much as the other fun hat-based platformer of 2017. I don't think that makes it the best Mario game. I'm sure someone else has something to say about that. But the way it's been put together certainly gives us a lot to talk about when it comes to both Mario and Nintendo's future from this point on. Light to medium spoilers, nothing big, but if you're worried about that kind of thing, then TLDR, buy it, play it, twist it, bop it.
I'm going to sleep.
One of the things I loved about the GameCube era of Mario titles was how it pushed the franchise outside of its comfort zone. Think about that launch title. Luigi's Mansion was a curveball that set the tone for everything that was to follow. Surprising, offbeat, specifically flavoured experiences that changed how we saw Nintendo's potential for flexibility. Amazing to think how controversial it all was back then. I remember people actually arguing about Wind Waker, like that's even a possible thing to do.
I love Wind Waker.
I think Nintendo get that. It would explain why they recently disregarded Galaxy as a continuation of the adventure titles, owing much more to the titles prior to 64 and its focus on mechanics. I can't deny the effect Galaxy has had on people. It's an expertly crafted experience on a lot of levels, but it was the first game where I found myself feeling like we'd taken a bit of a step back conceptually. Why does it always come down to this? Why does everything basically look the same? Didn't Ratchet and Psychonauts do this first? Why am I being pelted with Rotten Tomatoes? Help! I know my disinterest in Galaxy doesn't diminish what it achieved. It is a very good game, but I'm all about big ideas, and Galaxy didn't seem like the next one of those. It was missing what I really liked about the incredibly flawed Sunshine. Sunshine's Resort was the next step up from 64's Castle, using the context of a populated environment to drive the player's natural curiosity and investment towards exploration and achievement. It also tried to tell a new story, which by Mario standards is an innovation unto itself. It put Mario in jail, gave us the most good boy of all time, and even actually managed to make the build up to the big bad's oh so obvious identity a fun experience. Until he opened his fucking mouth.
Mario! How dare you disturb my family vacation?
Odyssey goes back to this idea of exploration, where you're enjoying just being in the space of the game world. Every level has been deliberately crafted to offer a different environmental sensation to simulate the experience of being a tourist in a foreign land, like stepping off the plane and instantly feeling the heat of a tropical climate, for example, or coming back home and getting shat on in Leeds.
Haha, your home sucks, Andy.
Fuck you, Will.
Oh, okay.
It's made possible through the textural and stylistic differences, each stage designed with a new tactile quality. This hatland made of felt, this super realistic forest, this jungle made of gummy. Yummy. Mario's always been something of a jobbing ambassador in the Mushroom Kingdom, so it works that he's the one constant factor to bring them all together and make them seem less jarring. Mark Brown's already talked about the hat's utility, which gives the gameplay an extra layer of mechanical depth not too dissimilar to the Flood Pack attempt. It's much less cumbersome, and already is a part of Mario's existing design, which, given how second nature it becomes, is way less distracting. The Flood's flaws have finally been laid bare with this clear refining of that concept, as well as presenting a sliding scale of new opportunities that are neither too game-breaking nor too limiting. It's capable of both saving you from extremely tight spots and promoting you some phenomenal cosmic power. So good. And all this would be worthless if the usual song and dance we've come to expect from the plot wasn't dressed to the nines. Bowser's not fucking around anymore. This wedding is happening, okay? How could it not be? He's got the cake, the flowers, the ring, the venue, and a swell-ass suit to show Mario just how much he means business. For a change, Mario really feels a full beat behind, already on the back foot in his efforts to stop the Koopa King, rather than just running in blind and seeing what's making all the racket. I know who I'd pick out in a lineup. Get the fuck out of here. We see Bowser's footprint quite literally come down on the planet as he forces his wedding into existence. It's this kind of detail that makes Odyssey hang together very nicely and feel like the adventure games of old. That kind of investment stretches across the characters. Even Peach's reactions form an underlying arc that she eventually pays off on. It's got such character generally. This fella's funny voice. This line of robots waiting for a Waz and one of them fucking died. This woman who's letting me know that the rock has left. Thank God I can come out now. Oh god, even the platforms are hungry and trying to eat ya. Why does this keep happening? It's why I love the Broodals. Another thing that made Galaxy feel kinda weak conceptually was that I didn't feel it contributed much personality to the series. Rosalina being the most bizarrely uninteresting inclusion as another not Peach I've seen yet. Even fucking Shy Guy had an impact, man. I mean, I don't care how much she rocks a bike suit, although, yeah geez, she rocks a bike suit. Sweaty boy. Thank God for the Broodals, the first new memorable Mario characters in about a decade, and who made me laugh just from the sound of their self-important theme song. a gang of cheeky rabbits specializing in weddings who come as a package to whatever villain pays their fees, and who are faced multiple times throughout the adventure to keep reminding you of exactly what you're trying to prevent. Bosses are integrated in a Sunshine manner, presiding over stages until Mario steps up to bat. Unlike that game, however, exploration between worlds is not as instantly accessible. You can't accumulate a bunch of moons and travel between optional levels. You must finish the specific main mission of each world before the next one is made available. This also includes certain scripted events which help contribute to what becomes an actual Odyssey, a long forward journey across the planet to the final showdown. And the best part is that, like any tourist, you can make the journey your own.
And it's a homemade puzzle of yours.
The huge amount of themed costumes, the souvenirs, the friends you start meeting in unexpected places, even the scuffs and breaks your ship gets into, all carried with you as the journey goes on. There's a map brochure for each level that gives you an overview, allowing you to read up and make your own informed decisions about what you want to do with your time in advance. There's an accumulating effect that fleshes out the worlds beyond Bowser's agenda and gives you a sense of ownership over what eventually becomes an incredibly fun post-game holiday. Makes you feel like you're gonna have a shit time dealing with customs. Nothing to declare. Everything to declare. It's a fun experience and certainly has all the trappings of a proper Mario adventure, but it kind of isn't?
What?
I understand that might sound really strange given everything I've just said, but I think there's an important distinction to be made here, one that puts this game's differences and perhaps your mileage into perspective. Now, Hat in Time feels like an old school 3D platformer adventure. It might be rough around the edges, but it's much closer to the approach of kitchen sink style exploration, with long and involving story-based missions. Odyssey feels like something else entirely, something that makes it feel like an example of Nintendo's way of producing all their games from now on. When you think of Mario 64, you probably think of the imposing castle you could explore, the hidden corridors and staircases that took you to more selectively detailed worlds. Or how about Sunshine, which offered up levels that totally exhausted the concepts they were given. You were getting that entire hotel to explore, or that theme park, or that harbour. These games were, as I keep mentioning, kitchen sink experiences. They set out a very defined set of space and then assembled a real density of structures within them. Inhabited locations that had their own sense of contextual geometry that made it feel as though the people within its walls could have designed it rather than just a game designer. Odyssey has this, but hands it out in chunks. There's the suggestion of a village or town in some locations, or a suggestion of a Galaxy or 64 inspired platforming segment, but really it's a huge amount of little taster landmarks. There's a lot of travel space between them, peppered with snapshots of activities, in an attempt to make each world feel much more expansive than the average 3D Mario level. I'm not opposed to that approach at all. I think this accomplishes their goal to make the player feel as though every level is its own country rather than a watertight suburban block. There are flags that emphasize this landmark design, even if they're not ostensibly always as far apart as the average Mario-sized level. Donk City is of course the closest the game comes to recapturing that sense of density, and even then it's a standalone world rather than the hub you'd normally associate this with, and certainly built on a different foundation of fast, constant contact with the core controls. And Jesus, if you had that many moons, why didn't you just... Fuck, you need all these moons, right? And so I gotta take them, but then you have no who's the real monster here? The game draws from the adventure titles, yes, but it draws the most from the philosophy of its direct parent and design team, Super Mario 3D World, with the adventure stuff mostly serving as window dressing. There are overarching challenges with hundreds of smaller, quicker tasks and rewards to find. The adventure constantly moving forward, rather than presented through a hub world that expands or shrinks as you progress. Transformations are once again at the forefront of the experience, giving it the same sense of manic energy. Many areas are compartmentalized in the same fashion for the player to deal with selectively. Bosses are fast-paced and in some cases pretty throwaway. Probably worth mentioning that 3D World was also likened to being a mishmash of everything the franchise had to offer at that point too. I suppose it had sort of been tried before. Galaxy 2 attempted a lot of this in a much less concise fashion. Much less. Now, I actually like 3D World a lot, and felt that this was the first Mario game to kind of sucker me back into Nintendo's future. I think part of that, looking back on it now, was how easy it was to get into. The game was deliberately designed to be a frothier affair, smaller rewards and stages that allowed players to limit themselves and enjoy quick sessions, and that seems to be what gives Odyssey the spring in its step that the previous adventure titles lacked. I felt a very similar experience with, believe it or not, Breath of the Wild. It's a huge game with a lot of stuff in it, but it's also very easy to break up and allocate your own time however you wish while making substantial progress. The absence of elongated dungeons made way for short shrines and overworld obstacles, apparently for this very purpose. Odyssey feels like it's the final test of this new style of rubber-banded design, and may dictate future games outside of this franchise. I don't think it's an accident that Prime, another exploration-based title, is also coming back, but there's one more thing at play here that really gives it the showcase feel that Breath of the Wild only partially had. I mean, yeah, I mentioned the effect of each world having its own aesthetic and the hat's playstyles, but I think it goes beyond that. Putting a broken ship together piece by piece on strange planets. This kingdom's aesthetic. The way this boss plays out. The tank mode. the hilariously edgy ditty playing while the world is being saved. And by the way, welcome to Station Square, a giant head and hands boss. Dun, 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 dun. They even have the fucking pyramid from Aladdin Math Quest. I mean, come on guys, I'm not stretching this, obviously. Odyssey feels like an entire notebook on Nintendo's history and gaming at large. I don't think this is a huge discovery, or that I'm super smart for recognizing it. They were pretty clear with the connection between Skyrim and Breath of the Wild, but Odyssey is really making use of it all in a way that's kind of exciting. Like, this is just step 1. What the fuck is step 2 supposed to look like? Nintendo has always taken on feedback, but they were also known for being incredibly insular when it came to design philosophies. Twilight Princess was the start of what seemed like a long and unchanging road of decisions, sending the Zelda franchise into sterility, until Link Between Worlds and Breath of the Wild whiplashed it back into life. Changes in both games reflected some very specific complaints that had, even in Wind Waker times, been ignored. It wasn't just Zelda either. There was this long period where somebody flipped the switch and Nintendo was like,
Back to formula.
Star Fox Zero felt like the last straw, and I think something inside of Reggie's big hands must have finally snapped, and one day it's gonna be Jeff.
You know, Jeff, you thought I came all the way up here for only one announcement? I don't forget about it. I'm just going home.
This is essentially Nintendo's new manifesto. They'll continue to create content that's both accessible and mechanically deep, but they've also cracked the way to compartmentalize that, so players can experience their idealized difficulty and time frame within the same space. They've turned worlds into malleable structures the player can always make meaningful progress in, regardless of the time allotted or ability. I think that also speaks to the way that the console has been created itself. They're also going to be flexing their muscles and exploring what's already in their ever-expanding toolbox that they can make more use of. Mario isn't just exploring new places, he's exploring new vistas of potential in the wider gaming world. That's what makes it feel like we're continuing the GameCube's good work, like Mario's returning to explore outside of his comfort zone. You have to wonder where the franchise is going to travel to next. Will Odyssey be followed by a series of smaller titles that go back to basics, or will this be the start of a more unique approach to a beloved franchise? I, for one, am at least now curious enough to go along for the ride and see what could be beyond the horizon.
I'm just going home.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I did a couple of other videos on platformers from 2017, so go check those out if that's your kinda bag. And sometimes I do videos on other subjects, and they're not funny either, so oops.
Deja vu.